Hello and welcome to UC Trends 2024. I'm Tom Wright and I'm delighted to be joined by Gito from Cisco. Gito, it's great to have you. Thanks for taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you for having me, Tom. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And we're going to be talking about what maybe the topic of 2023 and 2024 today. That's generative AI, and you're well placed to discuss this because you won several awards at the UC Awards, including Best UCaaS Provider. So, actually, Gito, just to kick us off, perhaps you could give us an overview of your role at Cisco.
Sure. So I've been at Cisco for close to 3.5 years now, or a little over. And I run the security and the collaboration businesses at Cisco. So
Great. So this is a great topic for you to discuss generative AI. And I think to start with, it would be good to get your kind of opinions of how this is impacting the way we're working already at such an early stage. A year ago, I'm not sure we were even talking about it, but how has it impacted everything in such a short space of time?
if you think about November 30th of 22, and when ChatGPT came out, I think it was almost like the world was put on notice to go out and rethink their strategies. Now, we've been working on AI for quite a while, but I think that there was a catalytic event with generative AI coming on the scene. And what ends up happening in technologies like these, Tom, is in the short term, you tend to overestimate the impact of these technologies. And in the long term, people grossly underestimate them, especially when there's a massive tectonic like platform shift that's going to occur. And I think AI is one of those most consequential platform shifts that we'll have experienced in the history of humanity, if you can kind of think about it. And by the way, we've had some pretty amazing, revolutions that have happened, whether it be, the printing press or the internet or the mobile revolution. Any of these are major kind of, step function changes in how people operated and existed. And I think AI is going to be one that probably trumps all of them. And the catalytic event for that was generative AI. But in the past year, what's happened is most of the companies in the world are starting to figure out how they're going to fundamentally reimagine, having AI be part of their future. And I think there's only going to be two kinds of companies in the future: ones that are, AI forward, I like to say, or ones that are completely irrelevant. I don't think there'll be any in the middle where you will be. I don't think there'll be a world where you'll be able to ignore AI and be a relevant company. That won't happen. Now, having said that, I think it's important to know that your and my life hasn't fundamentally gotten, changed in the past 12 months. We've had some productivity enhancements, but I still live the way that I lived a year ago. But when I think about what happens in 5 years, 10 years, there's going to be a pretty seismic shift that will occur in the way that we all kind of communicate, work, think about the jobs we're going to have, all of those pieces. So I think in the short term, probably an overestimation. In the long term, a gross underestimation of what might happen. But it's the fastest that I've at least seen a technology where every company in the world started saying, "What are we going to do about it?" We were lucky at Cisco because we've spent billions on artificial intelligence over the course of the past few years, and already had a lot of kind of deep learning talent and all of that internally in house, and so we were able to do a lot with it. But it definitely acted as a great, kind of catalyst for us as well.
Yeah, and like you said, I think it is exciting to think about what it might be like in 5, 10 years. But I know it's coincided with quite a lot of innovation at WebEx in your platforms, coincided in a really good event at WebEx One. So I just wonder if you could sum up, sort of at this quite early stage, how you're weaving generative AI into the products and services you offer at WebEx.
Yeah, so at WebEx, I'm so proud of the team because we have fundamentally. I mean, firstly, it's been one of the most AI forward platforms, if you can think of one in the market, not just in collaboration but across the board. Like we've done a lot with AI, and not just in the things outside of generative, but also in the field of language with things like speech to text transcription, and if you think about language translation, all of those pieces we had perfected quite a bit a few years ago, and we've seen accuracy rates close to those of human accuracy rates when you start to think about it. But when it came to generative AI, we felt like there was a huge opportunity to take the ball even further. And what specifically could we be thinking of as we thought about that was, how can we make every interaction just have friction be taken out of it, and still have humans in the loop, but take out the friction that actually burdens our day on a regular basis. So we had four major announcements at WebEx One that you heard. The first one was around this notion of a real-time media model that can augment a large language model. What does that mean? Well, there's so much that we on a daily basis think about when we communicate with each other that happens to be nonverbal. And what we want to do is make sure that those nonverbal cues can be fused with the language cues that can actually create the magic of communication. And so real-time media model allowed us to kind of do that. And the one example I like to give is, imagine you're sitting in a meeting and there's a doorbell that rings because the shipping company is there to deliver some package for you during the holidays, and you get up to leave to open the door. Immediately, the camera would know you're no longer in front of the camera and blur your camera. It would actually mute you automatically. And the moment you came back, it would detect that you're back, unmute you, and turn on your camera. But the one other thing it'll do is it'll ask you, hey, you were gone for about 7 minutes. During these 7 minutes, a lot transpired. Do you want to see a summary of what happened during the 7 minutes? And give you a summary so that you don't have to interrupt someone in the meeting. That's a magical way to go out and do things. So that was what we announced. So that was real-time media model. The other thing that we did was fundamentally kind of reimagine how communication happens with audio. So we announced a codec, and that's an AI codec, which will allow you to actually generate content that might have actually gotten missed because of network drop or packet loss that might happen in a spotty connection. And so our codecs are about 60 up to 16 times more efficient with the use of bandwidth than what you would have had with the industry standard codec that we use, all of us use today. The third area was you take that same kind of genius of the codec with audio and apply it also to video. So if you have spotty connection and kind of intermittent kind of connectivity, which by the way doesn't happen just in remote countries, it also happens in all parts of developed countries, because you always have a lot of packet loss. What we can now do is downsize the video, send only a small set of bits over the wire, and then super scale it with AI so that you have a better kind of resolution at the end than what you might have even started at the beginning. And then lastly, we've actually used generative AI in every aspect of messaging, meetings, video, vidcast, contact center. All of those areas have been enriched with generative AI. So a customer, when they call into a brand, never has to repeat themselves again when they get transferred from one place to the other, because the agent sees a summary of what happened. If you send a vidcast video, which is our kind of recording tool for async video, you send a vidcast to your team, and that's 8 minutes long, and people don't have 8 minutes to watch it. What you could do is actually automatically classify it into chapters, and you'll be able to summarize it. So you can create almost like a movie trailer of that video. Those are the kind of things that are fundamentally going to, they might seem very interesting right now, but over time, I think you'll just get so used to them that you can't imagine life without them. And that's just what we're starting with today. You think about what happens in the future, it completely changes once again, because you will see multimodal communication get to be much more prominent. You will see things around generative AI that are not just for text, but also for audio and video that have many, many more use cases. And we will get better also in, thinking about how we can responsibly innovate at a very fast pace. Today, I think there's a fair amount of emphasis that we place on making sure that if there's a trade-off between responsible innovation and speed, we always pick responsible innovation. And I think you'll be able to do responsible AI at a much faster pace over time as well. But those are all the things that I think there's a lot of excitement in the future. What's in store?
Yeah, there's so much opportunity for innovation, including the four you just mentioned. And you did start to touch on my next question, actually. It's there's lots of excitement, but also some concerns about using AI responsibly. So I just wonder if you could pick out some of the biggest challenges you think there are around using AI responsibly. Talk about how Cisco is navigating that and how you balance responsibility with, I suppose, effectiveness.
I think in any of these kind of scenarios, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One is there's going to be just the obvious stuff, like you don't want to make sure that you use data from someone without them knowing about it, and try to make sure that the data that you use to train your models is not real customer data. And if you are going to use customer data, you have to be explicit about asking the customer whether it's okay for them to go out and offer up their data. Otherwise, you're not going to train the model. And I think those are very important aspects to keep in mind. So the first one is just the honoring and respecting privacy of a customer with the use of their data, and actually being very clear that the customer owns the data, you don't own the data. That's number one. But then there's a whole other slew of things that you have to keep in mind, such as fairness and bias in the way in which you actually what kind of data you use to go out and train the model. Even if it's synthetic data, you just want to make sure that there's a level of fairness associated with them, and extract the bias from the training of the model. And security around the data. All of those things are going to be pretty important. And we have a responsible AI framework that every engineer not only goes through but thinks about before they ship any of the products. And this, by all means, takes time, and it actually, it would be faster to do it without it, but that's not the trade-off we're willing to make. And that's the second bit, which is making sure that where the data comes from, how we're using it, how do we go out. Like, we've built a practice around using synthetic data wherever possible so that we don't have to use customer data. And then when we have to use customer data, unless the customer knows in plain English, this is what we're going to use your data for, are you okay? We won't use it, And then the third thing that you start to think about is, what are the downsides of AI? And how are you going to make sure that for those downsides, we have thought through those scenarios? Because one of the things, Tom, I'll tell you that I think Silicon Valley has historically not been very good at is when you have a disruptive platform and a technology. The reason it's called disruption, it creates an imbalance in the way that things were operating in the past
Okay.
compared to what the technology's infusion does to you. And that imbalance has goodness because it gives you cost efficiencies, it gives you productivity boosts, it gives you all of that. But sometimes there's also downsides to that imbalance. And those downsides are things that the tech industry in the past has always said, you know what, that's okay. That's just par for the course. And there's going to be some collateral damage and you'll just deal with it as it happens. And I don't think that's actually a responsible way to think about AI in this particular state, because there might be some downsides and there will be some downsides. And we have to make sure that we are very thoughtful about what those downsides are with the technologies we create, and don't just think about the upside scenario, the positive scenario, but also think about the downside scenario, and try to make sure that you can kind of create situations where those downsides risks get mitigated. That might be in working better with the public sector and making sure that we can actually do a better private-public partnership, so that regulations, as they start to come about, the lawmakers and policymakers are educated about what the downside risks might be. That might be things like making sure that, as tempting as it might be sometimes to go out and release some capabilities, if those capabilities have a pretty meaningful downside, that you actually take a moment and don't release them, because it could have, kind of pretty negative consequential implications, and that you think about those and simulate that scenario out just as much as you simulate the upside scenario. Those are all things to think about from a responsibility standpoint. And it needs to make sure that we factored in things like fairness and transparency and bias, and security and privacy at the very core of where development happens, rather than as an afterthought after you've built everything and say, oh, okay, does this actually meet the checkboxes? And I think you just build very different products when you actually start about it at the origination rather than as an after the fact.
Great. Well, there's certainly a lot to think about, and it's going to be very exciting in 2024. And it'd be interesting to have this conversation with you in 12 months' time and see how things unfolded. And I'd like to finish, actually, if that's okay, by asking you where we can expect to see Cisco focus in terms of generative AI in 2024.
Well, for some of it, Tom, you're going to have to make sure that you come to our event next year and kind of see the announcements. But all joking aside, I'd say that there's a few things that we're really excited about on both the infrastructure side from Cisco as well as on the application side, and on the foundation model side. So I'll kind of think about it across the board. So on the infrastructure side, you should, expect that we're going to do a lot of innovation around making sure that the networking that happens between the GPUs is going to have a lot of innovation. And if you think about the consumption, one of the biggest constraints that you have in the AI industry is GPUs, and the second big constraint is power, right? And if you think about what happens in the infrastructure and the networking itself, the more you can make the bits that communicate from one GPU to the other get more efficient, the fabric of networking get more efficient, the more of that power you can dedicate to the GPU, which is the more important piece. And so I think expect a lot of innovation from us in that area, what we call AI scheduled fabric. We've got teams of people, and Silicon is actually does wonders for us over there in how we can go out and have standardized mechanisms of communication between GPUs. That's going to just make us all efficient. So that's number one. Then you go to the foundation models, and I think you'll find that there's a tremendous amount of innovation that's happening also on the large language models and the foundation models, where it's not just making sure that they're larger parameter models, but there are sometimes that you might need smaller models. Sometimes you might need models at the edge. Sometimes you might need models that actually are much more fine-tunable. There's going to be tooling that's required for the models. The reason for doing all of that is so that you can actually create much more custom models for customers. It's not just something that you do at a generic level. And so there's going to be a lot of possibilities in that area of kind of fine-tunability of models and creating more customized models for customers. And then the capabilities that an end user sees and an IT administrator sees that enhance their experience, where user experiences completely change as a result of generative AI. You should just expect more and more of that. We just showed you a little bit of a glimpse what a real-time media model can do, what codecs can do, what generative AI capabilities in your message stream can do to change your tone or make sure that they can actually suggest a response to ensure that you have the right level of summarization. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's going to be so many more ways that we can actually reduce the talent shortage that we face right now in some of the industries that we're in. For example, in security, there's about 3.5 to 4 million jobs that go unfilled every year, just because companies don't have the right talent to go out and hire for those jobs, which then makes that company unsafe because they can't go out and fight off the adversary for a threat that might occur. And wouldn't it be great if you had every role, every persona had some kind of an assistant that could really propel them forward as you move into this? And so that's an area where you'll see a tremendous amount of innovation. And then what you'll see is standardization as well, where different companies that provide these kind of capabilities, you will start to see interoperability between those companies as well. And so I think we are in not even the completion of the first chapter yet of what the possibilities are with AI. Imagine when the PC revolution started and what was in store, and it was hard to even imagine what those things were that were in store when the PC revolution started, because people thought about that as a very tactical thing. And then you kind of start to see the compounding effect of every single innovation that layers on top of the other. And we call that feature stacking on our side, where every single feature you build makes the next feature better. with the way that we do AI capabilities, and you'll start to see a lot of that. So I'm actually super excited about technology getting easier, because I think it's way too hard right now to use. It getting more effective. But the most exciting thing about AI that I think gets grossly underestimated right now is most people think of AI as much more of a summarization engine. I can summarize things for you that otherwise would have been there. What people don't think about as a true power of AI is what happens when original insights start to get created with AI that didn't exist in the corpus of human knowledge in the past. And that takes us to the next level. And you will see that much of that will start to happen as the early stages of AGI start to come out, but even before then, where these generative AI models will get smart enough where they will be able to start suggesting and thinking of things that humans have not thought of before, rather than just summarizing. When that starts to happen, you have another major step function unlock that starts to occur in society. Now, keeping all of that, we have to make sure that there's a parallel and equal effort in the advancement of responsible AI. Because if that falls behind, then I think you'll actually find that it might, there is a small chance that this becomes net negative for society. And so we, as developers of this technology, have to look at both sides, not just one side of the house.
Well, GT, we're certainly going to be keeping an eye out for all of that news coming out of Cisco next year, and I hope to see you again at one of your events. But in the meantime, it's been great to speak to you during this session. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Thank you everyone for watching. Remember, you can follow the full UC Trends series on uctoday.com and via the big UC update hashtag. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.